Hey everyone, Little Thomas here, with a behind the scenes video for Ocean Monument. Ocean Monument is a prequel to Village Raid and the second chapter in the Alex and Steve universe. After finishing Derp Infection and the Battle Royale series, I needed something new to work on. I initially wanted to work on a sequel to Battle Royale 3, but with the success of Village Raid, I instead wanted to do something with Alex and Steve. So I looked into the core mechanics of Minecraft and was quite intrigued by the Guardians and all the new underwater features added in the Aquatic update. When I was first pitching an Ocean Monument animation, we decided very early on that we wanted to connect it with Village Raid to form some sort of Alex and Steve cinematic universe. So I looked into ways I could connect the two animations together. In Village Raid, Alex had a really cool looking trident, but we had no idea how she obtained it. So I decided to make Ocean Monument a prequel to Village Raid, focusing on how... Alexa, what? I didn't say anything. I need to mute Alexa. Focusing on how Alex obtained the trident and learned to use it. Once I had the core idea down, it came down to scripting the animation, which mainly consists of just bullet pointed lists of what happens in each scene. Once that was completed and approved by the rest of the BPS team, I moved on to set design. I only really needed to build one set, which was Alex and Steve's new house, with some help from the Songs World Builders. In all seriousness, without the builders, the house would look something like this. So, thank you for the help, builders. Once building was complete, I gathered the music, modeled some assets, imported the maps into Blender, and cracked on with animating. Ocean Monument was my first animation using Blender 2.8, so it took a bit of time getting used to all the new changes. I actually intended on using Blender's new render engine Eevee instead of Cycles, which we used to use in 2.79, as I thought it would save a lot of time when rendering. The difference between Cycles and Eevee is that Cycles is pre-rendered, which means it requires a lot longer to render frames, whereas with Eevee it's rendered in real time, like video games. However, I quickly realized that Eevee was too much of a visual downgrade from Cycles, even with the added bonus of real-time volumetrics. And with really intense scenes with a bunch of character rigs, render times often exceeded well over a minute anyway, so I decided to switch back to Cycles. This is probably a good time to talk about our new rig, the BPS Rig V3 made by Zophiecat. The V3 rig has got a few improvements, the ability to switch between IK and LK seamlessly even when you're mid-animation. The face has been updated a little bit, so you can control the eyebrows and the eyes, or the top eyes at least, with one controller, which makes face animating so much easier. There's also a blink controller now, as well as better teeth if you want to use teeth. I tend to use teeth a lot more now that we have a rig with actual good teeth that don't just like snap shut. There's this version and then there's an armored version. I'll leave both download links in the description. Eventually we will make a proper rig video. I just wanted to quickly mention that yes, we do have a new rig. Yes, we are using it. Yes, you can download it, and we will make a rig video eventually. We begin the animation with Alex and Steve fishing. I spent so long trying to transition from above the water to underwater seamlessly in one scene. This worked while I was still in Eevee, however in Cycles it was far too complicated to get working without keyframing, compositing nodes and missed distances, so I ended up having to save the scene off as an underwater version once I'd finished animating. In the scene where Alex and Steve return home, I was initially going to include patrons farming. However, it seemed a bit weird that a bunch of people would be farming for Alex and Steve while they were off adventuring. It almost felt like they were keeping the patrons as slaves to work on their farm. After getting a nightmare about the Guardians, Alex begins to prepare to go hunting for them, which brings me to one of the mistakes in Ocean Monument. I thought the Aquafinity enchantment meant you could breathe underwater for 8 minutes.
What have I done?
In hindsight, I should probably have looked at what the enchantments actually did, not just judging it based off the name. Maybe we should actually play some more of Minecraft, I think it's called. Also the Boots of Deathstrider, which explains how Alex was able to move around faster during the Guardian fight later on. At least I researched one of the enchantments. Then Alex and Steve arrive at a village, and if you notice, it's the same one from Village Raid, adding another connection between the two animations. I even used the same audio track as the one that was used in Village Raid, although I did play around with the instruments a little to make it sound a bit different. I went for a much cooler environment this time around, instead of the warm orange we see in Village Raid. I was originally going to Alex and Steve were originally going to bring the wolf along with them, and they would have left the wolf behind at the village when they eventually set out with the patrons to go find the Guardians, which would have explained why the wolf was there at the beginning of Village Raid. However, it felt like an unnecessary connection to make, since Alex and Steve return home at the end anyway. It would seem a bit weird to leave their wolf at a random village. Also, I completely forgot to animate the wolf in that scene, so there's not really anything to talk about for these next two scenes, so I'm going to move right on to scene 6. There was a lot cut out of this fight scene. Lux and Pixel, whose boat was destroyed in the previous scene, were supposed to be rescued for a start. Each patron was supposed to have their own little scene taking out drowned and guardians, and Alex was even supposed to stab a guardian and sort of ride it inside the monument. However, this was around the point when I was starting to feel extremely burned out from this animation, so I decided to just focus on getting Alex to the monument. Why do I tease, Thomas? Tease. You have a T in your goddamn name. Pronounce your goddamn T's. So I decided on this is why I didn't do Battle Royale 3 behind the scenes, because I just couldn't speak. So I decided to just focus on gonna get Alex to the monument. So I decided to just focus on getting Alex to the monument. Lighting the interior of the monument was pretty easy. I just made the sea lanterns cast a huge amount of light, added a ton of mist, then added bubble particles. I also added a turbulent this is gonna be difficult. I also added a turbulent displacement effect on the footage to give the underwater scenes a more distorted effect. I had to make the Guardian beams from scratch. The sound, however, wasn't very faithful. It's literally just a Halo Spartan laser sound effect with a low pass filter. I thought it sounded cool, so. A few people were confused with why Alex was able to call the trident to her without a loyalty enchantment, and I wanted to clear that up. The trident does actually have the loyalty enchantment. However, it was already enchanted by the time Alex obtained it. Maybe the drowned zombie who had the trident before enchanted it before he got infected. However, after she found it... What? However, it took her time to learn how to call it. I can't write. Why am I employed here? I can't write. However, she wasn't able to just call it back to her immediately. She had to learn the loyalty enchantment for herself. In a way, she had to learn how to call it back to her. If you notice, the trident was dim until Alex learned how to call the trident back to her. So yeah, I bent the rules a little bit, but only to make a more interesting story, as I felt Alex just adding a loyalty enchantment would have just been pretty boring. Alex pulling her trident from the wreckage of the monument right at the end of the animation was the one scene I had planned from the beginning, and was actually one of the first scenes I animated. However, when writing Ocean Monument, the scene played out a little differently. Originally, right after that, a few villagers would have arrived to ask for their help after a pillager attack on their village, which would have led directly into Village Raid. However, we wanted these animations to be enjoyed as standalones while still connecting to each other. Including that scene would have kind of spoilt the nice ending we had, and left the animation feeling incomplete for those who haven't watched Village Raid, including the introduction of Alex's trident and showing the village from Village Raid was more than enough to connect two animations anyway. And that just about wraps up the production. Once the animation was complete and rendered, all I had to do was edit, export and upload. I hope you enjoyed Ocean Monument, bearing a few flaws and stuff that breaks Minecraft canon. If you enjoyed our Alex and Steve animations, don't worry, as we have plenty more of those coming out very soon. Be sure to like the video and leave a comment on what you'd like to see Alex and Steve tackle next time. If you'd like to discuss Alex and Steve further, as well as our other animations with members of our community, be sure to join our Discord server, where we just set up a new Alex and Steve discussions category. You can even post some cool fan art in our fan art wall. A link to our Discord will be on screen and in the description. Also, be sure to check out our Patreon if you want early access to animations, your skins featured in animations, and much more. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next behind the scenes.